So I will present to you today the pilot action vision for a zero carbon cross-border functional region. And to very briefly explain the context, this pilot action is based on a process here in Luxembourg that is called Luxembourg in Transition. It was launched last year in October. And I have put here a definition on the slide. It's what we call a cooperative competition, where we have invited a number of international multidisciplinary teams. So this means they can come from, be research institutes, be university, but also be consultancies that specialize in different topics related to the transition process. And we ask them to develop territorial visions and implementation strategies for this transition process of the cross-border functional region of Luxembourg until 2050. Why is it a cooperative competition? Because there are different stages to this process. So at the beginning, 10 teams have presented their reports. They will then be evaluated by different kinds of institutions or bodies of this process. And so in the next stage, there will be 6 teams. And at the end, we will have 3 different sort of competing visions and implementation strategies where we hope to find an inspiration for our national policy documents and plans. It was very important for us to not only look at Luxembourg as a closed off entity and as a country, because as you said, as a small country, in the heart of Europe, not the least, cross-border cooperation is vital for us. We have more than 200,000 people coming into Luxembourg every day. That is 1/3 of the entire population, basically, that is coming to Luxembourg every day and leaving in the evening. So therefore, it was very important for us to also look at the cross-border functional area. The key questions that in this process we are looking at is how to develop a joint territorial vision for this area, and how to translate it into concrete projects that cover both sides of the border. So for us, it doesn't make sense if you talk about reducing carbon emissions. It doesn't make sense to say we're only focusing on measures in Luxembourg if on the other side of the border the status quo is going on. I think then we have achieved nothing. Therefore, it's really important to look at both sides of the border. And we thought it's very important to look at this cross-border dimension of decarbonization and resilience. I mean, we have a European approach to it, but we think that especially in cross-border regions, it's maybe a topic that has not been covered so extensively, and so therefore we really want to tackle this. And this also gives us this double focus of, on the one hand, cross-border, and on the other hand, transition, meaning decarbonization and resilience. The goals that we have with this concrete pilot actions is that we sort of want to take this Luxembourg and transition process as a good practice and share the methodology with European partners and try to inspire its transfer. The transfer can be basically small elements of it, but it can also be the entire process. So we are very open about that. But we think that it's an important topic to cover, and that many cross-border regions in Europe could benefit potentially from this experience. But we also want to make this a little bit wider and discuss the challenges of cross-border spatial planning in relation with the ecological transition, so that we sort of create a little bit of a legacy, so that it's not alone a standalone process, but that sort of as the implementation of the territorial agenda goes on, there is something that remains, and that in the future partners that are interested can have a look at what we were doing. But I should mention that we are very flexible, and we are going to adjust the pilot action to the expectations and also interests of the partners specifically. The next slide, please. Here's just a very short visualization. What do I mean when I talk about the cross-border functional region of Luxembourg? So in the dark purple, you basically see Luxembourg. Around that is what we would define as the cross-border functional region. It's basically linked to commuting. So where do most of the commuters come from? And sort of the light gray shape, that is really the institutional setting of the greater region. So this is at a much larger scale, and we are really more interested in what is really sort of directly surrounding the country. And on the right side, you see some of the topics. I took this from a presentation on one of the teams, some of the topics that we were looking at. So waste, mobility, food, drinking water, which surprisingly is a huge problem for Luxembourg, and obviously energy consumption. The next slide, please. We have divided the pilot action into 2 different phases. One phase will start this month and will run for approximately 1 year. We have called it the initiation of a mutual learning and sharing process. What we are going to do is we will present and discuss the process step by step with the partners, and really also give them an opportunity to critically assess this and tell them from their perspective sort of what they think is worth transferring, what they think is working, what they think is not working, and maybe also have a reflection about what would this mean for a different sort of border context. I mean, all of this is really tailored to the Luxembourgish borders, but it could be a very different experience in borders in other parts of Europe. So we are really interested in also in hearing what the partners have to say about the process and also the outputs that are coming from the teams. Sort of once we have concluded this this mutual learning and sharing process, we would go to the second phase where we want to develop a guidance note. So this is related to the sort of legacy that I was talking about. This will then take up the rest of the year 2022, where based on the experiences we want together with partners draft a short guidance note. So we are talking about 2 to 3 pages where we would describe the different steps and try to distill some lessons learned on how to approach this topic in general. And we hope that also in the future this will be this will be interesting and useful for cross-border regions willing to engage in such a process. These are the 2 phases of the pilot action. If I could get the next slide. Here you just get a quick overview over the partners that so far. So as you can see, so here they are in chronological order. That was maybe not the best idea, I just realized. But as you can see, they really go from the European level down to the very local cross-border level. We have the Kommunalgemeinschaft Europa-Region Pomerania on the Polish-German border, which is really sort of at the local level. But we also have something in between with Český and MOT, 2 organizations that work respectively on the Hungarian borders, on the French borders. We have 2 EGTCs on the French, Spanish, and on the German, Dutch, Belgium border. We have the Association of European Border Regions, and also very importantly, ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, to focus more on the climate and resilience. There are 2 more partners where they have indicated their interest, but where they have to check internally whether it's okay. So the Benelux Union and the European Committee of the Regions. And we really think that even with these 2, that will make our partnership stronger. As I've said before, we are quite flexible. So we are not doing this sort of as a vanity project for ourselves, but we want to create something that is useful for the partners. So the involvement that they can give can really range from an active partner willing to transfer the process to more of a passive observer who's interested in some of the lessons learned. So we are really we're really flexible with that. And now, if we go to the next slide, please. I think I have 3 slides more specifically on what this means for Interreg. First of all, focusing on what this specific pilot action could be linked to Interreg programs in general. So in the short term, I can obviously ask, I mean, we have here programs from all over Europe. Do you know any actors who you think might be interested in participating in this pilot actions, partners who could benefit from the experiences? That would be sort of my open call for interest to all of you. In the medium term, I think the relevant questions, as the speakers before me have said, is could this pilot action, either smaller elements or the entire methodology, inspire the development of individual Interreg projects? A colleague of mine at the ministry has then pointed out to me that there could be a very strong link with PO5. So this is something that has to be explored, because obviously we are looking here at visioning. So that would be probably an action that would be predestined for something along the lines of PO5. But in any case, I thought it important to mention that we will inform and communicate about this pilot action in a very regular and transparent manner. At the moment, we are looking at, so we have a website for Luxembourg in transition, and we are looking at how we can make a specific section that deals with the European outreach and transfer. So this is more this pilot action and Interact in general. If we could go to the next slide, please. I mention here a specific example. So there is a project called SDTGR, which is the French abbreviation for Spatial Development Concept for the Greater Region, which obviously is a project in the program of the cross-border program of the Greater Region, running from 2018 until the end of this year, which makes it slightly, let's say, odd, because obviously the pilot action is in the timing sort of behind this project. But I still think that this project is quite interesting, as it can offer an example of how this could be implemented. So what this project is doing, it is performing a territorial analysis of the Greater Region based on a joint set of indicators that were developed in a very cooperative process. Then they are developing a vision and an operational strategy in a participatory process. So there was a workshop where this was a large-scale workshop, I should add, where the vision and the strategy were developed. And at the end of it, a number of lighthouse projects will be launched. So I think these three elements are exactly what our process are doing, maybe less focused on decarbonization and resilience, but sort of more in a classical spatial planning perspective, integrated, covering several covering several themes, also economic development, etc. But if you are interested in looking more concretely what an Interact project could look like, I really can recommend this project to you to give you a rough idea of what could be done to implement our kind of pilot action concretely via an Interact project. And that would bring me to my last slide. Thank you. So which type of Interact projects could contribute to the implementation of the TA 2030 more broadly? As you can see on the picture, it is about the key question of how Interact projects can be plugged into the TA. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I think at a very basic level, sort of projects that contribute and that aim at strengthening territorial cohesion across borders are a prime candidate for linking up with the territorial agenda. So here it is, while territorial cohesion is about leaving no one behind, I think the other side of the metal is creating something together. And so if a project is really strengthening the standing of a cross-border region sort of in both countries, making it more visible to the national authorities and making sure that it has an adequate provision of services, I think projects that do exactly that would be prime candidates for really contributing to the territorial agenda. If we go in the analysis a little bit further, what does territorial cohesion mean? Territorial cohesion also means dealing with the territorial dimension of sector policies. So what we usually talk about is that unfortunately, sector policies are often spatially blind in the sense that they are very much focused on their sector objectives, but they make no distinction on how this is implemented on the ground. So we are really looking at a place-based approach that takes the specificities of the cross-border region into account and really tries to adapt the sector policies to that cross-border region. I have summed that up as territory matters. So as soon as a project would also really aim at doing that, at tailoring a specific sector policy to a cross-border region, we also think that it would be a perfect fit for the TA. And lastly, it's important that projects sort of promote an integrated and multi-level approach, which is the horizontal and the vertical integration, in the sense that everything is connected. So if projects really aim at providing or contributing to the whole picture, that different sectors in this cross-border region work together, but that also different levels work together. I think that is also a really good contribution that can be made to the implementation of the Territorial Agenda 2030. I think it would be really ambitious to combine all three of these elements. I don't want to call them criteria, but rather elements. But I think that a territorial vision for a cross-border region with concrete projects could actually achieve in combining all three of those elements. So yeah, that would be my answer on the link between Interreg projects and the TA. Thank you very much. And on the last slide, I think you can find my contact details. So if you know of any stakeholder or actor interested, just get in touch with me. Thank you.